you.
Okay.
Okay, right, there we go. I said, as it says on the screen there may be turbulence, and that's the first bit of turbulence. Okay, so first image, a view of Lisbon city.
Well, it's really good to see monochrome, and monochrome, you have to deal with that in a totally different manner when taking images, because we're after contrast, texture, and all other manner of things that we would get with colour, and we're trying to relate in monochrome. But here we have, an image that shows us that perhaps Lisbon is the place to go for a holiday. Portugal certainly is popular. This scene, it's kind of busy, isn't it? There's a lot of information contained in here, and the contrast for me is perhaps not enough. There's something I'm going to perhaps repeat a bit often, perhaps a bit too often, because the harsh light that we can see within the scene is kind of drawing our eye upwards. Did we need all the bass? There's a lot of background noise going on. Someone's...
Yeah, so let me see if I can mute whoever it is.
And I'm trying to shout over it.
Yeah.
So I started, unfortunately, with a rather low mark at 4.5.
On the deck.
Yeah, I felt in this image, you see that if you sort of compare the two, the contrast in this image really does jump out at you. It starts saying monochrome, whereas the previous was kind of flat and so bright. But here we certainly got the deck of this craft. Again, it is busy, but the literature on the back kind of draws the eye there, and then you explore around the craft itself. Good that all the background's dark, that doesn't impinge on the foreground areas. And it's very important in monochrome that we emphasize, the mono aspect of our imagery. And having contrast really does work extremely well. It does work well here, but it is a busy scene. So our eye is wandering from all over it. But I like the detail, and it's sharp where it should be. Now 6 for that.
Thank you for the music.
I enjoyed the sort of the way the photographer's gone about their eye to show this. It is a shame that the double...
Ron, you've gone on to mute.
That was my fault. I'm trying to find out who's
muted apart from Ron and Lorraine. So please mute yourself now.
Yeah, Ron's on.
Yeah.
I don't know who else. I don't know who the other person is.
Somebody's got the TV or a radio on.
Yeah, I can't see who's unmuted. Oh.
Is it right?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so not to worry. I'm quite used to this when I judge elsewhere. I get heckled all night long.
Right. So thank you for the music again. Sorry about that, Ron.
I think the title certainly does justice to the image, doesn't it? It's a shame we've lost the machine head on the double bass, really on that very edge of the scene, and that draws attention to that slight imperfection. Whereas we got the base of the double bass, there's just a little bit room where perhaps we could have just turned the camera and got the whole instrument in. Of course, when viewing for a viewfinder, you can lose the edges. Always remember that viewfinders don't tell us the whole story. But I like the contrast here within the scene and the repeated patterns of the chairs and the double bass and the music stands. So it's all in keeping with the scene. But it is unfortunate we've lost the top of that, the machine head. So it's a 6.5.
Spike.
Yeah, but this is an excellent image of this gentleman. It's very formal, obviously military, and I like the way the photographer's gone about the way they've taken his image. They've captured something of him because he is very, very formal. Certainly stern by that gaze. I don't know if I'd want to cross him if I was in another uniform and he was about to bark out an order, because I think I'd have to stand still to attention. I like the way it's been illuminated. We have lost the hands, but that's not too important in this image because we are concentrating on his gaze and what he's wearing. So I found that a really appealing portrait and engaging as well. So I'd like to hold that back.
Approaching Dunstanburgh Castle.
Yes, all of us who've been to Northumberland, and Northumberland is a fabulous county. It's a dark county as well, so you get plenty of images of the stars if you go there. Mind you, when it's dark, you could get lost. But Dunstanburgh is the whole coastline of Northumberland is filled with castles in either ruins or as they were built. And here Dunstanburgh has got that very noticeable shape. Kind of reminds you of Corfe Castle, really, with the parapets and what's left of the towers. Taken from the beach side, as we can see, we've got a lot of room. We've got to travel to get to our main subject that's in the title. We've got to go a long distance. And perhaps in monochrome, that doesn't fare so well. I would have liked to have seen it cropped and perhaps waited for the people to go. I know there's always people at Dunstanburgh Castle, but perhaps you get a moment where there's nobody. And I think I would have then taken an image or perhaps even cloned them out. It's perfectly legal to do that, certainly on an image such as this. But we've got texture, and the photographer decided to take it from this point of view and this angle, and it managed a 5.
Hawkshead Church.
Again, it's really strange how it's worked. Now, if you compare Dunstanburgh Castle with Hawkshead Church, now in this image, we are distinctly led up the path towards the church. We're going to pass all the gravestones that really fill in that area. I like the way that they're illuminated in the background and the good use of the shadow. The shadow really aids us on our travel and our journey towards what we would expect to be the entrance of the church that we can see very over on the right hand side. There's lots of texture in it. There's a good sky as well. I felt this was altogether, a very good, competent architectural image, and a 7.5 for that.
Contemplation.
Yeah, the good expression on this gentleman's face. He looks sort of in a, contemplative mood, doesn't he? He's seen something that's caught his eye and is in actually dwelling on whatever it is. We can't see that, even if you look in the reflections of his glasses. There's nothing you can discern. Again, the background has been suitably wiped out, so your depth of field is really shallow, and that's another aspect of monochrome, that it doesn't impinge on your main subject matter. Good detail in his dark clothing and the hat, and in the background, where perhaps there's something going on that he's not interested in, but it actually feels part of the story. So that managed a 7.
Imagine.
I like the straight on view here, and she's very accommodating as your young model, and she knows she's being photographed, and she's giving you that modelled gaze, and that really is, we really are connecting with her. And eyes are all important when it comes to communication and how we see fellow men. That we make contact with our eyes, don't we? And that way then we communicate, and there's a very good communication going on with this young lady, and I find it very appealing, of course, of the fairer sex. The hand, you've done really well with the hand. I think they are very difficult to actually include when you're doing a portrait. How do you place that hand? Well, here, raising that one finger to the temple, really has added that just a little bit extra. A bit more thought has gone into the profile of the portrait of this particular young lady, and that managed an 8.
Blackthorn.
Well, it will be coming up for that season very soon. Hopefully spring will be upon us sooner than we think. And this is what happens, you know, all the blossom arrives ready to be, she won't go in, pollinated by the bees, because that's precisely, you know, the whole idea of blossom is to continue the species or the type. And they are, again, not easy to do, especially in monochrome, because you get very bright areas where the light's hitting directly, and then you get the shadow areas. But this has been handled rather well. We've got depth of the blooms, haven't we? We can go into where they're all sharp, and we can actually almost pick them out. And as we go into the rest of the scene, as it drifts off out of focus, holding it all in. And I found that, again, quite attractive, and that was a 6.
Badgered.
Yes, I'm one of those that would be in that protest, because badgers, a lot of people may have a negative feeling about them, and certainly somebody I spoke to yesterday, because they were digging up his garden, he wasn't too happy about his lawn being moved by the badgers, because he's got them at the bottom of his garden. And here we have, it's all about the cull, because TB is actually blamed on badgers, TB in cattle, that is. And here, you know, we got the protester with a badger's head. I'm sure it's just a mask and not a real one. And then we have that bystander with that gaze, and that really does make a good connection, doesn't it? I like that. That sort of adds to the sense of the protest, that she's being watched and perhaps feeling, you know, are they taking my number? You know, almost feeling as if it's a police state. There's the obligatory Costa coffee in the background. You know, I'm sure you all got a cup of coffee afterwards, or did they come out and give you a cup of coffee for protesting? So I enjoy this photojournalism, and in monochrome, that's the perfect place for it. So I'm going to hold that one back.
Impala.
No, this is not an impala. This is a red lechwe. Those particular horns that red lechwe have as the curve, impala have relatively straight horns, and they're certainly not got that curl on them. But I like the way the photographer has approached the natural history subject. It reminds me of the modern photographers who take natural history, who go about trying to create an artistic impression of whatever they're taking. And I like the way it's got a fractured border. You know, it reminds us of infrared and goodness knows what else. But it is a very attractive antelope anyway. And I like the pose also. So I'm going to hold this one back.
Silent strength.
Yeah, well, we have these in Epping Forest. A longhorn cattle, although this looks more like the old Highland cattle, doesn't it? So definitely shaggy. And they're allowed to roam free, roam around, you know, taking down the vegetation, removing, you know, what would otherwise impede the forest floor. They're keeping it rather clean of all the brush and the bracken that actually would grow up, and the forest floor will be impregnable. And it's a good study of this particular cattle, and they are purebred. They're native to Britain, and you can see that shaggy coat, you know, it's good for protection. And those horns, well, those horns, I don't know if I'd want to get too close, but it's a good study, although we are going downhill and we've lost the back end, but we know what the back end looks like. And I feel that that's appropriate within this image, showing us the particular breed of cattle as well. And that's a 7 for that.
Icon marshes.
Yeah, Icon. I visited Icon because I managed to get one of those photo view books. And there's a specific tree, well, there's more than one specific tree on the Icon Marsh. When I went down to do this particular scene, unfortunately, the water levels were rather high and I couldn't get anywhere near it. So I concentrated on the tree. But this is a wonderful rendition of this particular area of Suffolk. I think it's painterly. I think too sharp. It's deliberately soft, and it sort of relies, on the image to entice us into the scene. And I'm loving the church. I think that's where I parked to go somewhere else. To Cove Hive, I think I went, and it was a reminder. I love the whole softness of this image and the way it sort of delicately shows us Suffolk softly. And an 8 for that.
Canterbury Street.
Well, this is a toned image, or it's got a tone. Unfortunately, really, we're down the street, we've got the yellow lines. We do have one figure really at the end where it converges. So it's almost on the vanishing point. And if you look at it quickly, excuse me, you may have missed that person. I had to look at it twice because it looks like it's almost in a tone, and colour, we're not supposed to have any tone in it whatsoever. So it doesn't matter too much in this particular scene. And it's a typical scene from Canterbury, all these narrow roads, narrow alleys. I felt that there was not enough of Canterbury in it, although we have all the houses that have got the timber framework that denotes age. But I think could have made most of it. I think I might have waited till he got out the scene entirely. So that only got a 4 for that.
In Isolation.
I like the idea, and of course that's what we might all be in eventually, or may be in already. COVID has really made a whole mess of the world, and people are not heeding to what they're being told. So isolation, I'm thinking that we'll be in this for another year, to say the least. And we may all be in isolation very soon, which is not what we want to be. We want to communicate. We want to be with our fellow friends and humans. And I thought this was kind of stark and really strong imagery that actually denotes what we are going through. So isolation, and I like the strength in the monochrome, managed a 7.5.
Bright and Breezy.
Yeah, again, when photographing boats or ships, anything that's on the water, trying to capture the whole craft could be problematic, because you're going to need a wide expanse, and then you wouldn't get so much in detail. Here, the photographer's gone in for the detail on the mast and the sails. The rigging is always very complex, so that's kind of made the image slightly disjointed. We all know that it needs to be there so that the sails can come down. But I think, in here, I might have tried to simplify the scene. And certainly if you're into sailing, well, then this is quite appropriate. But I think in this type of competition, you need something a little bit more impact. But it's a good monochrome. There's still some good shadow and highlights, really well retained in monochrome, and a 5 for that.
Bridal Way in Winter Light.
Yes, this certainly is in Winter Light, and it's well composed, isn't it? We are drawn all the way through the scene, right to where the vanishing point disappears, and we're allowed to sort of journey on. We wonder where it's going, but there's those trees that block in our path. But I like the way that we are drawn into the image. Good use of light, using the light and shade. The sky was really quite kind to you. I think there's enough cloud to fill in those areas. I might have just cropped a tad off the top, but I'm enjoying the shadows as well of the trees along the road. I think that adds to our journey, and strength in mono. That managed an 8.
Proud American Biker.
Well, yeah, I think he's kind of proud of what he's got there. Is it interesting? Is it telling us anything about the biker himself? You know, he's just leaning on his bike. It looks like it's a BMW. So that's a German bike he's leaning on. But, you know, they obviously they export to the US. I find him just slightly disconnected from his bike. Why don't you get him to sit on it and sort of give that kind of biker appeal? You know, get him to either put his helmet on or leave it off and put it somewhere else. Because there is a slight disconnection, although he is connected to the bike with his right arm. But for me, it's just a kind of standard image. I wanted something else out of this. So they only managed a 4.
Partners in crime.
Yes, an interesting scenario. I love the gaze of the young woman beyond the card plough. And I like his sneer as well. And the use of the light to give that shadow of the blinds in the background. I'm not too keen on all the foreground. I feel there's too much. You know, the chips. Did we need all the chips? I think we could have left those out and just had him holding the cards. Did we need the whiskey bottle and the whiskey glass? I find that they are taking away something from their expressions. And I think their expressions are worth the image alone, especially hers leaning on his shoulder and that sneer that he has. I really felt that the extras in the image, the accoutrements really into the scene, detract from them two alone. And I like the way it's been illuminated. I do like that light and shade in the background depicting blinds and something a little bit seedy. Perhaps we could have had them both smoking. But I did enjoy that. I felt that this is an image that the opportunity has been missed. I'm sure you've got more, but I'd certainly remove all those artifacts. And that managed a 7.
Age of Discovery, Monument, Lisbon.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we've all seen this many a time. And it certainly is absolutely photogenic. There's no doubt about that. The sculpture who actually chiseled this out of stone, oh goodness knows how many there were, but it depicts this scene. And it's one of strength. It's trying to say that, you know, Portugal, and Portugal was a strong nation. It probably still is in terms that we visit. But they were the explorers of the world. You know, they were on the top of the list. You know, Da Gama and goodness knows who else. You know, went across the oceans where people would dread. They said when you get to the edge, you fall off. But Franco da Gama, I think that was his name, defied that and went all the way. And that's some of what this particular sculpture depicts. And I enjoyed it for its strength. There's a good sense of contrast as well. And that managed a 6.
The snapshot.
Yes, I'm sure we'll all remember if we saw Jurassic Park when he's sitting on the toilet and a Tyrannosaurus Rex comes along and bites his head off, which is only a snack for a T-Rex, of course. And that's kind of what this reminded me of straight away. It made me smile. And, you know, I really felt that there was something about to happen. And however it might be a composite, it doesn't really matter either way, because the message comes across. Because I don't know if I'd want to be chased by a T-Rex. There's far too many teeth in it to sort of do some damage. It's not like a garden dog, is it? So I'm going to hold that back, please.
The bridge.
Yeah, in this sense, you know, the previous one, we had the whole instrument. Here we're just concentrating on the part of the instrument where the strings go across and then link to the machine head, and then we get the tension and the tone. Again, I felt that perhaps there is information in here, but again, it's just a little bit too wide. It got in a little bit tighter, kept the note, as it were, that's in the face of the double bass or whatever, it probably looks like that, and where the bridge is and the strings. I think here you know, we are spreading out a little bit. Again, it's up to you. It's your choice. You're the photographer. And as the viewer, you know, I know what it looks like. I admire the way that you've gone about it, you know, that you've decided just to take that one section. But it's against whatever else is here tonight, and that is a bit unfortunate. So a 5 for that.
Willie Lott's cottage.
Yes, I'm sure that we've all been there, haven't we? I've been there numerous times and managed a load of rubbish. I haven't managed a good shot of Willie Lott's cottage at all. I much prefer Constable's because he made a better job than I did. But here, I like the strength of this in a monochrome. I think the photographer has got a point of view where there is the ripples of the water, you know, really starting to dissect that reflection. And there's some strength in the mono. You've got a good sky. Obviously, that just light patch on the left-hand side. Well, there's nothing you can do about that, especially from this point of view. And I like the way the foliage is sort of keeping us in to Willie Lott's cottage. And the reflection adds that as well. So in all, it's an extremely good image of a very difficult image to take because it's visited by everybody. Everybody takes it, and I think you've done an excellent job on it here. 8.5.
Kitchen lines.
I fell in love with this image. It's absolutely simple. It's very linear, and you know it says such a lot. The inclusion of the radio is a masterstroke in my mind. You know, that really does work. Or is it a thermometer? Oh, it's a Honeywell. Yes, it's the thermometer that is that's sitting on that shelf. So this place is hot. I like the whole design of this. I think the photographers thought about their composition and the linears work extremely well. And the way it's been illuminated adds to that as well. So forgive me for saying it's a radio when it was a thermometer, and I like to hold that back.
Injured dog gets a lift.
Yes, I'm hoping that the Scotty dog managed to recover from whatever injury it had acquired somewhere along the line. I mean, this is the new canine ambulance that it's sitting in. I can't see any blue lights, so it looks very appealing, does this dog? Doesn't appear to be in any form of pain from the way it's looking at the photographer. But I like the way, you know, that you've used it and said, you know, the dog is injured. It obviously doesn't want to walk anywhere. That's the injury. It prefers to be pushed around. So it's an appealing pet image. And dogs are very popular at the moment because you see lots of pictures of them. Excuse me. And it's an appealing Scotty, and a 6.5 for him or her.
Glass and steel.
Yeah, this is very Victorian, isn't it? The way that this is all designed, and we've got lots of curves and straight lines. It's linear and curved, so that there's a lot to look at. It's very detailed. It certainly benefits monochrome because it's got the hardness of the steel, and that really does come across exceedingly well. Is it a little bit busy in all its configuration? Could we have sort of simplified it? But I think it does show us, you know, the structure and the technique of the builders of the past. You know, the ironmongers are really, you know, were magnificent when we look at this particular structure. So for an architectural structure and a part of, a 6 for that.
Steve and Bonzo.
Yeah, I found this very appealing. As I said, dogs certainly are featured an awful lot these days, and why not? Because they're man's best friend. I've just finished reading Finn, the police dog that was stabbed by that awful geezer who was robbing a robbery, and he only got 4 months for nearly taking the dog's life. And here you see the connection between animal and man, especially dogs. because they are subservient to us, and they also are very appealing. There's a certain sense of love in the connection between the dog and this gentleman that's holding him. I found that very appealing. He's a monochrome. We got eye contact with the dog. We don't need it with the sitter, because I think if we did have, it would be detracting from the whole scene, because he's looking down onto his dog and almost, you know, in the fashion that this is my best friend. And I'd like to hold that back, please.
London Reflections.
Yes, I'm just trying to see on my, yeah. Hang on, just give me a chance. Right, somewhere in here. Yes, got it. Yes, London Reflections. Well, London is full of glass and steel, and that makes it kind of attractive in a photogenic manner, especially as we got a reflection that's doubling up what's going on with the building itself. So it's not jumbled, because there is a very linear aspect to this scene that we can follow through with our eyes. We can even go diagonal as we get nearer to the top of the image. But beyond that, you know, we need somewhere to actually stop our gaze, need to arrest our attention. So we're going up one line, we're going down a vertical and going back, and we can travel all over it in that manner. But I think in this sense, it needed something else. It needed somebody in a window, if that could have been arranged. But still interesting in architectural terms, a 6.
Bubbly.
Well, I think the pair of them drank all of that. If it were full of champagne, they wouldn't be walking home, would they? Because that would be an enormous quantity. So this is for somebody, obviously somebody's birthday party, and this is part of the celebrations where they will have proper bubbling. Yeah, I found that, again, it has a message. It's a good kind of street candid. I would have, for my money, would have cropped the left-hand side off and taken that light area out. It doesn't add to the image, and it allows us to escape. We want to be held in by what's going on with the two people in the scene as they walk through it. But on the right-hand side, that's okay. There's no problem with that, because we are concentrating on what they're about. Oh dear. Well, I've got an interference. It's all right. It should be picked up, hopefully. Yes, thank goodness for that. It should be downstairs. Anyway, so we have the contrast in the monochromes as well, you know, the whites and the blacks. But I suppose, you know, it's a good candid and street, but a 5.5 for that.
Moon Blossom.
Yeah, I was intrigued with this, and I think it might be a composite, but it may not be, because the blossom's been illuminated against the black background, stands out. What it's trying to suggest, is it a new moon? And you know, one could read into that it is. And I found that appealing in design, that you've got the two. You've got certainly the moon itself with all its context, and then we've got the structure of this particular tree, shrub, and the blooms on it. So I felt that was interesting, and enough, you know, to actually want to explore it as well. A 7.5 for that. No, a 7. Sorry, I've got to stick to what I put on the email.
Soldier Pilings.
Yes, that's why I keep going on to my notes. Yes, soldier pilings. I was thinking, you know, obviously the soldier connection is that they're in line and they're all erect, aren't they? One wonders what they're pilings for, but I like the landscape. It's kind of this strong juxtaposition between what could almost be formal lines of pilings against, you know, the complex nature of the background. You know, and I find that there's enough in here. I like the cloudscape. I think that holds us in as well. That dark area on top, keeping us down. We've got the dark area in the foreground, so our view is towards the lighter pilings and the texture that they have. So it's a good combination, and I felt that that was enough to sort of give it a 7.
Keep watching. We'll have this as the last one before the interval, and then we'll take a 10-minute break.
Okay. Yes. Well, this is a poignant image, isn't it? I think that's what the strength of these structures are, and we can relate to them, can't we? Within all our families, our predecessors, one way or another, fought somewhere or something in a war, because we had those 2 great wars running consecutively, almost, not a lot of gap between them, and millions upon millions of people died unwittingly for whatever reason. And this particular cenotaph, as it were, is very strong. It's very grainy as well. I felt that come across very well, sort of to add to the poignancy. And I felt again that the way that the photographers composed it, with the 2 yew trees either side supporting the structure in the middle. A 7.5 for that. I need my glasses on.
Oops. There we go. Meant to do that. There we go. Kelpie.
Oh yes, Kelpie. Now all of you, obviously somebody's been there. This is a fantastic sculpture. It's so photogenic, it's untrue. And in monochrome, it really does have impact, doesn't it? The sky is great that is behind this particular sculpture. And I really think it emphasizes it entirely. And in monochrome, it does have that literal impact. In color, it does pick up the light, so there's lots of reflections off the steel that it's made from. But in monochrome, it really does suit the whole aspects of this particular sculpture. And it has impact, so I'm going to hold that back, please.
Memories of times past.
Yes, if only, isn't it? It's definitely an if only. Even if we could get there today, the Americans, it probably would be this fall, because they still haven't taken COVID seriously, but I'm sure that the new president will certainly change that. Good old, whatever his name was, forgettable, he was just an idiot. So, but we have a scene here that we, all those who've been to New York are familiar with. It is very busy. It's full of advertising, and it really does grab you when you go there, because it's just got that much impact in New York. In monochrome, it does emphasize that. It reminds me of the images taken in the past, perhaps in the 40s and 50s. The scene wouldn't have changed too much apart from the advertising and the vehicles. So this one managed I think it's a 6.5. Is that correct?
7.5.
7.5, there we are. 7.5, that's what it was.
Rosebuds.
Yes, rosebuds. I really enjoyed this particular still life. In monochrome, the aspect of mono has softened the whole detail, like the way it's diffused, and we are concentrating on the rosebuds themselves. The vase is just part of the scene that's holding the buds up in that position. And I felt, again, the photographer had thought about how they wanted this to be finalized. And it's a cracking job, and certainly one that I was impressed with, and an 8 for that.
Yes, okay, so Hals Grimkja at Reykjavik.
Yes, they're quite a mouthful, aren't they, Icelandic names? I could never get my tongue around them at all. And I was familiar with this church. I mean, this is in Reykjavik, as the title suggests. We couldn't even get to the top. It was all scaffolded out when we were there, which is really unfortunate. But I did get inside and have a good look up. So it's a splendid building. It looks like it's about to take off, doesn't it? It's an Icelandic jet. I think it's almost replicated a geyser. one way and another. But I felt it's a little bit, it's a dark and moody, this image, isn't it? It's got sort of foreboding about it even. I hope that's not saying anything about the Icelandics themselves, but I wanted some more light on it perhaps, just to illuminate the structure and the texture, and a 5 for that.
View of Dover Castle.
Again, it's strange how they turned up. You know, we got one architectural image, the previous, dark and broody. We go to Dover Castle and it's light and airy. And this is a building that's meant to protect the coast. And Dover Castle is certainly a wonderful castle to visit. You could spend all day there and a bit more, and you could even get lost, because it really does stand above Dover, and it's a pure fortification. Here, I like the way you've included some of the castle and some of the landscape as well. Kind of balances up what we've got going on. The fortifications and the landscape beyond, why it needed certainly protecting. It was often used to come from the sea, didn't it? It was where their main sort of focus of protection would be. So that's a 6.
The gator and the gull.
Yes, I had my doubts about this, and I felt that the gull's a herring gull that got lost, flown across the Atlantic and landed in Florida on an alligator's head. I like perhaps your ingenuity shown in this particular image, and perhaps your technique as well. But combining the two is, I think, a little bit inappropriate. You could say that it's not a natural history image entirely, it's just an image that you've entered into the competition, so it's open and you can interpret as you wish. I did like the inclusion of the reflection. I thought that was a good bit of work. But I've been to Florida many a time, and I've never seen a gull on an alligator's head. It would end up in an alligator's mouth. It's quite a juicy middle in the end. 6 for that.
Geronimo's Monastery, Lisbon.
Yes, I think we've seen parts of it already. And here, I think you could have made more of it. I think it's the wrong time of day you've gone along to photograph it. That might have been the only time of day that you got to go and photograph this magnificent cathedral. Because the illumination is really quite harsh, isn't it? It's almost directly above where you're standing. If you look at the shadows, they're almost straight down. So there's no modelling, or very little modelling, on the figurines contained within the structure. And that kind of lets it down. It all becomes a little bit over bright. That is a shame. And including the arch, I think I might have, again, gone up a little bit more, removed some of the bottom, perhaps had something, just a heavier balance at the bottom. I think here it's a record shot of this particular building, but not in the best light. A 4 for that.
Watch the birdie.
Yes, you just wonder what birdie they're watching. There's definitely 2 birdies, according to the gentleman on the left and the gentleman in the middle. The one on the right hasn't quite made his mind up what birdie wants to watch. So there is a kind of a storytelling going on here. And I like the way that all these photographers prefer to sit and take their image and handle their cameras so differently. I think the gentleman on the left needs to put his hand underneath the lens to steady it. I like the gentleman in the middle, and the one in the right hasn't, as I said, hasn't made his mind up exactly what he's going to be doing. So it's an intuitive image, a candid, of course, and it kind of does work to a sense. So that was a 6.5.
What we used to do.
Yeah, harking back, no doubt about that. You know, that we'd like to get back. I'm not a shopper, and nor's Maggie, but you can see that this is a record of perhaps what we're going through, and certainly where we've been, because we can read the literature, hand sanitizer, please wear face coverings. You know, that's now something we all do intuitively, and we even got the gift cards in the background. For my money, I would have cropped that top area off because again, it's bright, it's on the edge. Just when you look at your work, you know, think to yourself, well, is that going to drag the eye up? Well, it does. Mask that off or crop it off, and you get just that much more stronger an image. So it's saying something about the times that we are living through, and for that, it is appropriate. And that was a 6 for that as well.
York Minster Flying Buttress.
Yes, York Minster, I've only ever stood on the outside. I've never been in because I've forgotten how much it was, but it certainly wasn't cheap, to say the least. And the structure of these magnificent minsters, you know, how did they build them? You just have to wonder, the stonemasonry and the stonemasons, you know, what sort of job did they have? And to hold this building all up, or to emphasize this strength of the building and those towers, certainly comes across in this image. And it certainly, you know, it's been well photographed. I was wondering about the sky, had it been dropped in, but it's not worrying me too much at all. And that managed a 7.
Proud.
I did like the empathy perhaps that's being shown in this image. Could it be related to Black Lives Matter? I think, you know, it's of a black man or black figurine. We certainly we can't see clearly the whole facial expression, but it's concentrated on that eye. And that eye is quite powerful within this scene. But again, I think you could have made more of it. I like the way you've used the lights, but I'm not over keen on the out of focus part of the portrayal of the face. The eye, yes, works very well, but I think it's taken away by the detraction of the out of focus part of the sculpture. So that only managed a 4.5.
Tower Bridge.
Well, all of us that live within shouting distance of London, you know, we're all familiar with Tower Bridge, and we'll all be familiar with the way it's illuminated. Here again, I think the photographer should have done more. I think it's been slightly overexposed. It's not pin sharp either. It's not going anywhere. Put it on a tripod and, you know, work away. And certainly take a variety of images of this particular scene, checking that you've got all those elements correct. And it is vitally important because this deserves to be absolutely pin sharp. And what I can see is not quite that. It might be your depth of field, might be a bit too shallow, but there's certainly a hint of unsharpness in the background. And I'd expect to see just a little bit more in that. But for me, it's just not quite hitting the mark because of the exposure on the bridge itself. And that managed a 4, I do believe. Yeah, 4.
Stairway to Heaven.
Yeah, Tate Britain. It is fabulous. There's this terrific staircase that either you're standing below and looking upwards to that observatory at the top. And I like your angles. I like the way you've used the shape and form of the stairwell and combining it with the structure of the Tate Britain amphitheatre almost. And I really like that way that you've expressed the architecture in a very individual manner. And it's very sharp, it's well exposed, and that got a 7.5, I think. No, that got an 8.
Venice floods.
Yes, I've never been to Venice when it's been flooded. I'd like to, because the city is sinking, as we all know, and high tides result in terrible flooding, which is not really good for all those that live there and all those that try and do a trade there as well. And he doesn't look too happy, does he? And this is how a lot of all the goods are transported in Venice, via these trolleys or via the barges along the canals. So, but again, it's just a slight tad off because it's coming towards you and the focus, sharp focus, is possibly actually reflection. So that managed a 5 for that.
Sea holly.
Yeah, and another botanical study under your control. I think you've certainly made and the sea holly look quite attractive. You can almost feel that you don't want to touch it because the points of the sea holly are, like all holly, very sharp. There is a softness within the interior, and I think it befits the rest of the scene because it's not crisply sharp. It's sharp enough for us to see the delineation of those leaves, and that is a 6.5.
Street light.
Yeah, this I really enjoyed. I felt that the photographer, really captured something a little bit out of the ordinary. I like the way that the street light has illuminated the umbrella. It is a shame about the shadows areas, the darkness. Perhaps a little bit of fill-in flash just may have illuminated and lifted the base of the image. But it is that illumination. I can see why the photographer was attracted to taking it. Why not? Because this is what photography is about, especially monochrome. That contrast is a major aspect. I might have, for my money, just taken those 2 bright highlights out of the next lamp down the walkway. I know we'd have some light on the pavement. You think, where on earth's that coming from? But that doesn't matter. We probably wouldn't go that far because the foreground actually holds our attention. And a 7 for that.
The M Building, Old Street, London.
I must admit, I've not seen this yet because obviously we're not allowed to journey up to London at the moment. It's out of bounds for most of us. I think there is some work being done on this particular image. The sky is very, very dark, but that could have been a red filter. So I'm only second guessing. But I felt, again, although you've got the building, the structure, it's very dominant within the scene. It is somewhat busy. There's a lot of busyness on the bottom, the base of the scene. We've got buses, etc., etc. And they're kind of pulling the eye down. They're trying to grab our attention, which is a bit of a shame. So it's not going anywhere. So I'm sure that the photographer, once they get back to London, once we all get back to London, it certainly is an attractive piece of architecture that demands more photography, and a 6 for that.
Zig or zag?
Yes, we remember that. It was a kids program, wasn't it, Zig and Zag? And well, that's what we got. We got Zig and Zag. We haven't got a lot else, have we, within the scene? I think from my position, I think I might have cropped the top off. That white building up on the top of that ridge or that cliff face draws the eye way beyond the Zig and Zag of the staircase or the stairwell. It pulls the eye completely past, because you can see what attracted the photographer is the contrast within the stairwell itself and the shadows and the attractive design. It certainly is that. But I think you just didn't look at the image when you finalized it, because it just needs to crop off. It's not doing anything as the top of that image. You could easily lose it and still keep the impact of the Zig and Zag. And that was a 5.
Southwold Pier.
I felt that this perhaps a little bit HDR has been sort of adjusted to this particular scene. It's got that kind of feeling. It's got lots of texture, isn't it? And that's what you would expect. Southwold Pier is very attractive on top, perhaps not so attractive underneath. But you can see the structure that's holding it all up. And the North Sea certainly compound that, can't it? So it has to be very, very strong. I like the supports, the way that they've looked like they're eroding thanks to the salt content that's splashing all over it. And I think it's a simple image, and it certainly does work. We have a vanishing point, or a point we can go to, and we can gaze down there for as long as we like. And that was a 7.
Motor Guzzi engine.
Well, I was never into motorbikes, and there may be some people at the club who just would drool over a motor guzzi. Again here, it's about detail, isn't it? Have we got too much of that engine and not concentrated again on parts of? You could argue, is there much in it that's photogenic? It's all about the machine, isn't it? This is the machine that gives the motor guzzi, its speed. And I think in that sense, we're losing slightly something, being, again, disconnected from the actual machine itself. And that managed a 5.5.
Urban sprawl.
Again, reminding of New York immediately, and this is probably from the one of the towers that I've forgotten. And you can see the Empire State. Oh no, this is probably from the Empire State, because there's the Chrysler. There's Chrysler in the distance, and then New York's wonderful because of the way it's been planned. It's on a grid system, so everything's in a grid. So everything actually works in design from this particular vantage point. You can actually almost imagine the grid of the roads. You can possibly see the fumes because they're always jammed. I like the distance as well. But from this height, you're going to get a great panorama. And you haven't tried to sort out the convergence. I've enjoyed that. That's an 8 for that.
2 in a terrace.
I felt this was really interesting. As photographers, you wander the streets and you're looking for something to grab your eye, whether it be a shape, a texture, a pattern. And here you come across this particular building with its 258 and 59. It looks like they're certainly joined, aren't they? If you look at the decorations, they're very similar. So it may be all belonging to one house. But that's the intrigue. We don't know. I enjoyed that. I thought it's asking a few questions from us as viewers, and the photographers knows the answer. And that was an 8 as well.
Settee at the Tate.
Yeah, I've not done this. I've been at the Tate quite a few times. I've done similar images to this, but not the Tate. The way the diffused glass works really adds that element of mystique, doesn't it? Because they're faceless, and of course they're disembodied as well. What I felt the photographer could have done, it was in post-processing, was remove those strip lights. They really do detract, because we're looking at the design of the hands and that block at the base, and then a diffusion of the glass. I think that is unfortunate. If you remove the strip lights, you'd have been onto a winner in this particular sense, because 3's always a good number. And as it stands, it got a 6.5.
You looking at me?
Yeah, a good horse study. Again, horses are as popular as dogs because they are attractive. They have good texture. We're all familiar with the Camargue horses dashing through the surf. And this is not so sleek as a Camargue horse, but certainly attractive, with certainly detail in the coat, the tail, and the mane. They really does look solid, doesn't it? And you've rendered it very well in monochrome. 7.5.
The Hustler, and that's the final image.
Yes, I forgot. I'm trying to remember what breed of dog this is. My daughter did have one until they had to have it put down. But it's something different, isn't it? Putting the hat on this particular. I've forgotten what it is. Won't go in. I don't know too many dogs, but I've enjoyed the pictorial aspect of this particular image and the way that you've captured part of his character. It could be a gangster, couldn't it? And that's, we associate certain aspects with certain breeds, and is of them. And I really enjoy that, so I'm going to hold that back as well. So what have I've held back?
So there's 8 held back.
Lovely.
And we shall now have a look at those.
Yep. Well,
Okay, so these are the ones that held back. So would you like me just to run through them again?
yeah, run through them and then we'll mark them in that order as well. Right, I think you can all see that, right, that all these images really do shout black and white. And that's what black and white photography is all about. All aspects we've seen here, texture, the way that the photographers approach the subject, the way that it's been illuminated as well, and then how you process those. And monochrome really is so rich. I love monochrome, and it's certainly benefited me. Most of my images that have won anything have been basically monochrome. So we're going to start with Spike, and that's going to be a 10.
Badgered.
Yes, Badgered, I felt was a good protest image, street photography of the moment. And certainly I like the gaze of whether she's in the protest or not. And that was a 9.
Impala.
Yeah, the red Lechway certainly has an artistic slant to it. I enjoyed the way the border has been used to sort of give us an imaginative element to the scene. And this may be a captive one. It could well be a wild, and that's a 10 as well.
The snapshot.
Yes, reminded me immediately of Jurassic Park. What we needed was the next shot of blood spurting out of his shoulders. That would look rather good, wouldn't it? And that managed a 9.
Kitchen lines.
I really enjoyed the simplicity of this, and I commend the photographer for making an absolute blinder out of very little, and that's a 10.
Steve and Bonzo.
Yeah, this had an empathy, and that I really came across, and it certainly does in monochrome, doesn't it? You look at the background, it doesn't interfere with the main subjects, does it? Monochrome has that empathy because it's all black and white, so there's nothing red or yellow in the background to sort of impart on the connection between these two, and that's a 9.
Kelpie.
Well, I love the strength in this, and it illustrates what black and white's all about. How you can go from almost bright whites to dark black, really shadow black. A 10 for the Kelpie.
The Hustler.
Yeah, I still don't know the breed. It doesn't matter. Pardon? The Staffy. That's it. Yes. I was never very keen on Corinne and Mark Staffy, but he endeared to me in the end. He never bit me because they got powerful jaws. But this has got a bit of attitude in it, and that's a 10 as well.
Okay, so now we will pull up the 10s. And if you could choose your...
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Your favourite. So I'll just, we'll put it into the light box.
Yes. Well,
so these are the ones. Do you want to choose from there?
Yes, I think you probably guess which one I'm going to choose. These are the kitchen lines.
Can we go through who the
Yeah.
10s were, please? Thank
Yes,
you.
we shall. Yes, we shall. So, okay. And if I do this, there we go. Actually, so that gives you everybody. So kitchen lines is Bruce Robertson.
Congratulations.
Well done.
Well done.
Well done. New member-ish or newish member. Impala, Lorraine Green.
Well done.
Well done,
Right.
Ryan.
Kelpie, Mike Deason.
Well done,
Well done.
Mike.
Well done, Mike.
The Hustler, Tori,
Oh,
Well,
well
Sorry,
done.
I knew that was Tori. That was brilliant.
and Spike Brian Fleming.
Well done,
Right.
Brian.
Congratulations.
excellent.
Okay.
He's not a staffy, by the way.
Is it a
Well, what is it?
He's an
American?
American bull cross mastiff.
Oh, there we are. I don't keep up with breeds of dog. I prefer collies, is what I like. Had it been a collie, I wouldn't have known.
Not unmute and stuff now. Oh, actually, before you do, I think Steve's got something to say.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you to Ron, not just for tonight, but because Ron and Maggie have been such fabulous friends of Houston District Photographic Society over many, many years. And yeah, I'm a little bit upset that they're going off on their travels and making our job as program secretary even more difficult, because you could not have asked for braver judging. How many people have had a 4 or a 4.5 in living memory? That was just, you know, it's a bit shocking because we're so used to 7s and 7.5s and 8s. What we have here tonight is, I think there were 4 4s, 2 4.5s and a 5. I mean, I remember almost committing suicide when I got a 5 once. So we need to get the Samaritans involved, I think. So I don't know how damaging you think your comments are, Ron, but you need to give it some serious social consideration. If you've never looked at Ron and Maggie's websites, then you've missed a treat. It is fantastic. I think eclectic is a massive understatement about Ron's and Maggie's fabulous photography. It goes from glamour to still life, from Africa to the Arctic. It goes from wildlife to architecture. It's utterly and completely astonishing that I have never seen anybody, any couple, because they're inseparable, any couple have such an extraordinary range of photographic subject matter and immense skill. And I wish you all the luck and everything you desire from your retirement time. It's absolutely marvelous. I don't know how we'll ever keep up with it, but it's just, you know, your work is just brilliant. So aside from the judging, the website, if you haven't looked at it, members, you really, really must go and look at it.
Oh, what can I say? Thank you very much, Steve, for that.
You're very welcome, Ron. But more to the point, yes, you've been a brilliant judge for us. You've given me some absolute rubbish marks for which I've always learnt, and I've cried and I've laughed and maybe I've got a bit better as a result. I'm sorry we haven't got Maggie here tonight, but give her our love and best wishes and tell her how much we're going to miss her. You've given us some great talks as well in the club, as well as judging us. So I'd like everybody to put their hands together and give a massive round of applause, not just for tonight, but for a whole career, a lifetime of photographic service from Ron and Maggie Tier. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That is, well, that's unbelievable, Steve. But we will, I might still do some presentations if we have the time. If we get an inquiry and we're not anywhere in the world or anything busy, we'll try and accommodate. But that will be few and far between, because Maggie wants to really go for it. Because, as I said, we'll be 70 this year, and we want to make the most of whatever we got left. So we have always enjoyed Halstead. I've even got lost in Halstead and turned up at your president's house when he rang me and said, "You're in the wrong place." And the experiences I've had with Halstead have always been totally enjoyable, and your photography has always been top notch. I've always been excited by what you do, and I'd like to have seen these prints in the flesh. I think that would have made a bit more difference in seeing them projected. And we have to accept the quality that's seen in that. The prints would have been much better, I think. So thank you again for all the pleasant years and nights spent in your company. It's always been a pleasure.
You're very welcome, Ron, and I hope we can invite you
Very
back
much, Ron and Maggie.
as a speaker.
Thank you very much.